So I expect you to have knowledge with C#. I'll be, of course, going over it, so you could actually have no skills at all with C#, and you could just copy and paste what I'm doing. But for those who actually want to learn, then there's a lot of things that's going to be covered on the Visual Studio side, well, on C# side. So let's just go in here, and we need to create basically a wrapper for the blend shapes. So we're going to call one blend shape, and that's how we're going to be doing that. And let's be neat and create a folder called scripts. Now we have a folder called scripts, so we can just drag our C# script in there. And now let's create a whole bunch of other scripts that we're going to need. We need a character customization. Hopefully I spelled that right. And we need a blend shape editor, or blend shape slider. And this is basically what our slider is going to use. And the last thing, we're going to be implementing the Singleton pattern. And singletons are really fun, but they're really confusing in Unity, of course, because of the whole entity system that they have going on. So blend shape slider, character customization, and singleton. So before we start working on the scripts, I hope you know how to use UIs, because that's another part of Unity that I'm not going to cover. You can just right click on here anywhere you want. You can just go to UI and let's create a panel. And if you have this still highlighted, or highlight canvas and press the 2D option and press F, you can see this is what's going to be rendered overlaid on your game window through your camera. And since we have a panel, let's grab the panel and let's just decrease the size like this and make it at least a little bit pretty. And you can check how it looks in the game. And let's be a little bit pretty. And let's make it less translucent or transparent. And there we have that. And we can go in here and start creating sliders. So slider, and make sure you edit this slider the way you want it to look. So let's just drag this. And of course you can spend hours making a slider pretty. I'm just making it bigger, and that's about it. So now you have a slider. If you go into play mode, you have a pretty slider. That doesn't do anything. You should be able to drag and drop this. If for some reason you can't move it, then for some reason your event system didn't appear in your inspector. That should automatically appear when you create a canvas. Okay, and since how many blend shapes did we create? So that's 1, since those are together. 2, 3, and then we have the single one here, so 4. So let's set our slider appropriately. So here it does go from the values from -100, since the blend shapes go from 0 to 100, and we can go down. We're going to go from -100 to 100. So value will be our 0. So if we go one way, it'll be doing the minimum value, like nose width min, and if we go the other way, it'll do nose width max. And that's basically how we're going to go about this. So we're going to go Control D and then drag down, shift, so it aligns on y-axis. And I believe we had 4. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we had 4, except the last one doesn't go from -100 to 100. This one just goes from 0 to 100, so we can set that like that. And of course you can add labels here to tell you what each one does, but I'm not going to go over that. I mean, it's not part of the tutorial, and we don't have many blend shapes, we don't really need to get organized. We're here to show everything working. So there we go. Nice and simple, and that's basically all you have to do for UI. UI has been stupidly simple ever since Unity 4.6. You don't even have to touch a script anymore just to create your UI. It's actually really amazing, it's really cool. and I definitely love it. Less work for me and a lot more power. Okay, now that we got the whole UI done, we can start with the sliders, or with the scripting, I mean. So I guess we're going to start with Blendshapes. So let Visual Studio load slowly, very slowly. Gotta love Visual Studio. This is one of the biggest complaints about it on a lot of people. Especially if you don't have fast computers, it's going to take quite a bit. But it is one, if not the only, most powerful IDE for C#. I mean, you have Xamarin Studio and Mono, and it's amazing how great those are compared to all the other languages with their IDEs. Anyways, here's our blend shape. We do not, of course, when you create a script with Unity, it gives you all these generic things. We do not care about systems collection, and we do not care about Unity Engine. And since we remove Unity Engine, it doesn't know what mono behavior is, and we definitely don't care about that. All we care about is using this as a wrapper. So it's just basically a wrapper class for positive and negative values of blend shapes. That's basically what it is. And just like the description says, and of course our blend shapes are gonna have names. So let's just create a string. Come on, property. And there's our name for our blend shape. And then we're also gonna create a. Okay, that's public. We need to also create a positive index and negative index, and that just basically stands for the ID where each of these blend shapes are located. So basically, this blend shape, cheek max, is at 0, cheek min is at 1, and so on. And we need to memorize these index. So let's say you actually had these out of order. You had cheeks max like right here, and you had cheeks min in the middle, or like at the very end. It wouldn't matter the way we have it scripted, but we do need to remember the IDs of it. So when I move the slider up, it'll say, oh yeah, change the slider at ID 0 and increase that float. So you basically have to find the array or list ID, and then you can increase the float from there. So with that, that'll be the int, and we're going to call this a positive index. And then for this one, we'll call this the negative index. And of course, since we're creating this wrapper, it's going to have a constructor. So public blend shape, and it's going to accept the positive and negative index. Actually, I don't even think we need the name of this. Yeah, we don't even need the name when I think about it. This will be handled through a dictionary. My apologies. We're going to have a database hold the name with the blend shape. The dictionary will use the key as a name, and yeah. And then it'll pull out the blend shape class, which will have 2 IDs. So from here, we can just go int positive index and int negative index. And of course, we're going to say this dot positive equals positive, and this dot negative equals negative. Nice and simple. And that's basically our wrapper for the blend shapes. Kind of. It's not really a wrapper, I guess, but it kind of works like one. And the next class that we need to work on is we can work on the. Oh, we can't work on character customization yet because we need to implement the Singleton. So let's start working on like the high level side so I can explain it. So let's work on blend shape sliders. And basically the blend shape slider will be really simplistic. First off, when you put the script on a game object, it should have the component of a slider, because that's what we're going to be controlling. So required component, type of, built-in reflections through Unity. And that will be first we need to go in here, give us the namespace.ui so we can access the slider. And then we can just type in slider. So now you can't use this script without a slider, or well, technically you can program the script without the slider, but when you do put the script on the into the inspector, if there is no slider that exists, then it will add a slider into the inspector, which is a nice thing that Unity does. And then we don't need anything to be updated. What we need is, let's get rid of that. First, we need to know the way the slider is going to work is you give it the name of the Blendshapes name in the Unity events, and this is how we're going to do it. So if you notice, if you go back into Unity, click on the slider and scroll down, it'll kind of work like this. Oh, not really. It'll work like this on the value change every time you change the value, but we're going to be creating our own kind of hidden event system. It won't be using the one built into the slider, because the one on the slider does not pass values to another script, another public script. The only way you can access this value right here if you directly reference this slider, and you have to pull that into some array and list, and it's really sloppy. So instead, we can have our class know nothing about this class, and we can just pass this through via an event. So the way we're going to do that is, first off, let's create a public string. And since Unity for some reason hates properties, I mean, that's probably a good explanation to it, we can't use properties, so let's just call this blend, let's follow Pascal case, blend shape name. So you give it a blend shape name, and it'll change that value based on the slider, and it needs to know the slider itself. So let's just go private slider and then slider. Not a fancy name, but does the job. So basically right here, you do not need to include the suffixes for this blend shape name, and that's how we're going to program it. Do not need suffix, so just give it the original name and it should work. Which is probably a little bit of a problem for, well, it's not actually a problem. That's, now that I think about it, we probably should have not done it. For the single one right here, basically, we probably should just not have the suffix, the naming convention down here, because it honestly doesn't matter. But whatever, we have it there, it's not going to break anything. But just keep in mind, if you continue this, then, and if you have a single one, then probably don't add the maxim in. It doesn't, it's just more of a hassle, I guess. Not really. But anyways, basically what I mean by no suffixes is obviously make sure you type in the original name, and this is why the naming convention was important. So it'll look for cheek, and it'll look for another one with cheek, and we're going to create a script where you specify what the positive suffix is and what the negative suffix is. So if it finds a positive suffix, it'll check the string cheek max and like, okay, this is maximum, now go find cheek min, and here's cheek min, and that's how our script is going to find it. So with that in mind, for if you're a consumer and you're creating this program for other people, we can just create a header and say do not include, and make sure you make this a string. Do not include the suffixes of the blend shape. You don't even need to do this, but this is because I know a lot of people have problems with this. They'll run into it, and it's one of those. Of course, that's why I can't change the value of the blend shape, because you have a suffix, and it's gonna, if you include a suffix, if you type in cheeks max in there, it's gonna read it as cheeks max max, because it's gonna look for the other suffix. And I hope that wasn't too confusing. Just type in the original name, no suffixes, and the blend shape for the slider. So we can just control save this now. And let's just go to our first slider and scroll down. And since it's a mono behavior, you should be able to drag this down and do it properly. And there we go. So basically the idea is you can type in nose width like that, and every time you move that slider, it'll change nose width. Don't accidentally put nose width max, because it doesn't know what a nose width max is. It only knows the original name without the suffix. And that's basically my entire explanation that I wasted on. Sorry about that. And now we don't need this. Let's just make this a private. It doesn't need to be public. And of course, just in case if you accidentally put space in the front or back, let's go to blend shape name equals itself, and let's just trim the spaces out. Fancy C# string manipulation there. And of course, we need to know the actual slider that is going to be passing its values, and it's on the component itself, so just say get component and slider. And it should automatically find that. If you have more than one sliders for whatever reason in your inspector, of course it'll break. I don't know why you would actually have two sliders, but that's the thing to keep in mind. And now the thing that can get confusing for people, we're going to be using C#'s event system, and this will be built on to from the sliders API of their events. I believe it uses a Unity event, and it's where we go to slider dot on value change, and we're going to add a listener to it. Add listener, and actually, now I think about it, we can't do this now because we're going to be adding a listener to our singleton, which will be character customization. So just tab this out, and let's just say, and this is how I like to program when I process my mind with this. Process my mind. When I start thinking this, how I want to program this, I always put a little commentary, and it's going to be when slider is moved, then call function of string name, or function, call function based on the blend shape name and pass float of slider. So the way I imagine it is there's going to be some sort of method that will accept the blend shape name, and it's going to be passing our slider value into it. And that's basically how that's going to work. And it's going to be nice and simple, and we're going to be using a lambda here. But first, before we do that, we of course need the character customization to work. So let's go and make sure you save this so you don't lose all your work. And before we can start character customization, we need to create our singleton, because there should only be one character customization. Unless you have a plan to create multiple character customizations, then go right ahead. If you're well knowledgeable enough to do that by yourself, then I encourage that. But for this, we don't need system collections. I don't even know what I use system collections for. I mostly use the generic. And of course it's going to be mono behavior, and one thing that makes this a little bit advanced is we're going to be using a generic. So every time we pass a class to this, and you can find documentations on how to create a singleton in Unity. There's plenty of them, and you can just copy and paste some code. This is my implementation, but there's definitely way better ones out there. This one is just a simple one. So basically, if you don't know what a singleton is, it's basically you don't give access to the constructor for other classes, and you create an instance within itself through a static class, and the only way an object or another class outside that script, or another way that script can call that singleton, is by calling the static class itself, which will be that one instance. I hope that didn't sound too confusing. Basically, create one instance through static class, don't give access to a constructor, and then call outside through that static class. That's a singleton. And there's a lot of controversy about it. Like, is it a good pattern? Is it not? But we're not going to cover that. There's a lot of things we're not covering. I'm just hoping I'm not making you bored of just hearing me ramble. So let's just get an instance once I can spell it. And this will be us creating our private static instance, like I said. So now that we have an instance created, and we can go in here and go step by step on how I was explaining this. So character customization. So character customization, we want to make sure that no class can go through our constructor, just like that. So bam, you can't create a private character customization. It'll be done through our singleton generic. So we go in here, and of course, we're not going to implement the lazy singleton, if you know what that is. We're going to implement the singleton the correct way. And the way we're going to implement this instance is basically we're going to create a property where you access this instance, and one thing that's amazing about properties is that you can control the how you want other users to get and set your data, and that's the strongest, and that's why I absolutely love properties. And Unity is quite annoying how you can't serialize properties and they don't show up in the inspectors, so you can probably create your own editor to make one show up. Anyways, let's just create a public static, and of course it's going to be the same class of T, and let's just make this capitalized for good programming syntax or something. And it's going to be a simple get. There's no set, because you should never be able to set this instance. It will spawn itself and it will exist the way it's supposed to be. So you get it, and the tricky thing about instances are, does it exist? How do we know when we get it? And what if there isn't an instance? What if it didn't spawn? Because the way normally in programming you can create it through a static class, but since we're using Unity, we want it to appear as a game object, which makes singletons a little bit tricky, and that's why you probably will see a lot of documentations on the internet about this. So it can exist as a static class, but we want it to exist as a component. So if the instance equals null and triple equals does not exist in C#, so sorry about that. And if the instance equals null, then simply we can just create one while it's being called, and that is really awesome. So we can just go new game object, and you can give it a name. You can just type in here, give it whatever name you want, and we're gonna create a game object and then add that component of and we want to make sure, I don't know if this will still work. I'm actually kind of curious now. Can we actually add a component of T without adding constraint that's a mono behavior? No. Okay. So you cannot add T because the IDE does not know or have no clue that what is this T. So basically, with generics, one of the awesome things that you have to do, which can be a little bit confusing for a lot of people, is you need to add a constraint. We do not know what this class is at all, but we do know that it's inheriting a mono behavior class. So this singleton is a mono behavior, but the script that we're passing into this will also be a mono behavior. So the way that you do that is you go where T constraint is a mono behavior, and there, now it knows that it's a mono behavior because you can only add components if they're mono behavior, and we just specify that this T will have a constraint of being a mono behavior, and that's why I accepted that. And of course we're going to return, just like all properties, the instance of the class. So this is why I love properties. You can invoke events in a property. If you do a lot of RPG stuff, one of the things I like to do with events is just if HP reaches 0, and another cool thing is you could cap it so you can never go below 0, and you can never go over your max HP value because you have your max HP and current HP. And if you go to 0, you can invoke an event death, and a lot of cool things happen. That's just something I really love about properties. But anyways, now that we got that done, now how do we know if the instance exists in the beginning? Because right now we have it set to, if you call the instance, it'll create itself. But let's say we already have an instance, we dragged and dropped it manually through the inspector. Now it exists, so somehow it has to know that it exists through that way instead of creating itself. So if the user or the developer decide to create it inside the Unity's inspector, you can just do a simple awake, which will be use the reflection method through Unity's mono behavior, and automatically find this awake. And when it calls us awake, we can say if instance does not equal null, then we can do debug.log, and let's just say how to inform the developer or user's other instance of, and I like to get a little bit fancy here, get type, because one thing that's cool about the singleton class is it's universal. It can work with any class, so you don't want to just say other instance exists, it's destroyed, because if instance does not equal null, that means there's already an instance of it that exists, so you want to destroy that instance of it. So you want to go in here, and what I mean by universal class, that I like to go this dot get type dot name, I believe. Yeah, okay, and plus has been destroyed. And with that, and make sure you follow proper C# syntax. So it's going to get the name of that class that you passed. So it'll say character customization has been destroyed. And you could also do it from here, I believe. You could just do that. Oh wait, no, I don't think you can use this command. There's probably a way. I'm probably too dumb to figure this out. Oh wait, did that actually? No, that definitely did not work. I'm not too sure. I'm a little bit new with generics. I know there's a way to get that T there. Does that not work? T. Or can I just go T dot get type dot name? No, that doesn't work. That'd be awesome if it did. But anyways, you can have it say if you pass a class called game manager and you want to use this, and if you already have another game manager, it'll destroy itself. But if an instance doesn't exist, then we want to set the instance, of course, equals this as T. So basically, if instance doesn't exist, bam, we just create an instance, and then all the other duplicates that goes through this will delete itself. If for some reason we have 500 character customization, only one of them, based on how CPU threading works, it runs the line of code line by line. One of them should be going through this first, and then all the others will just be nulled, or the instance would already exist and delete itself. So that's how we create our character customization. Probably a lot of talk about singletons. Now we can finally work with the character customization, and this is going to be a fun universal character customization. You can have an object as long as it follows the naming convention that you set for the Blendshapes in your 3D modeling program. It can be any kind of object. It could be a dog, it could be just a cube or cylinder, a human, a house, anything with Blendshapes. With this character customization, it should be able to edit it through the Blendshapes sliders, and it's going to be a really powerful tool, and hopefully you get a knack out of it, because it'll be pretty awesome.